The citation taped to my front door was still flapping in the February wind when I peeled it off at 6:30 in the morning, squinting at the words that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. I stood there in my driveway in Allentown, Pennsylvania, holding what appeared to be an official HOA violation notice for $500. My breath formed clouds in the freezing air as I read it again, certain I had misunderstood. But no, there it was in bold letters. Violation of Community Standards Section 4.7 regarding unauthorized snow removal exceeding reasonable community expectations and creating unfair aesthetic disparities between properties. My name is Henry Quinlan, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision for 3 years without any issues. I worked as a mechanical engineer for a manufacturing company, and I took pride in keeping my property maintained. The neighborhood was decent, with rows of colonial-style homes built in the early 2000s, mature trees lining the streets, and generally friendly neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. Yesterday had brought us 12 inches of snow, one of the bigger storms we had seen all winter. I had woken up at 4 in the morning, unable to sleep, and decided to get a head start on clearing my driveway and walkways. I owned a quality snowblower that I had purchased 2 winters ago, and I took satisfaction in the clean, efficient work it did. By 5:30, my entire driveway was clear, my sidewalk was spotless, and I had even cleared the area around my mailbox and the public sidewalk in front of my house as required by Township ordinance. I went back inside, made coffee, and felt good about getting the work done before heading to the office. The sun was not even up yet. I had no idea that my efficiency had apparently angered someone enough to issue a fine. I pulled out my phone and called the HOA management number listed on the citation. It went to voicemail. Of course it did. It was not even 7 in the morning yet. "This is Henry Quinlan at 847 Maple Ridge Drive," I said after the beep. "I just received a citation for snow removal, which makes absolutely no sense. I followed all township requirements and cleared my property safely and completely. I need someone to call me back immediately to explain this ridiculous fine." I got ready for work, still fuming about the notice. As I backed out of my cleared driveway, I noticed several of my neighbors were just starting to emerge with their snow shovels. Tom Hendricks next door waved at me, and I waved back, wondering if he had received a similar citation. His driveway still had all 12 inches sitting on it, untouched. At work, I could not focus properly. I kept thinking about that $500 fine. During my lunch break, I checked the HOA bylaws on their website, searching for Section 4.7. When I finally found it, buried in a PDF that was clearly written by someone with too much time on their hands, the actual language was even more absurd than the citation. Homeowners must maintain reasonable snow removal practices that align with community standards and neighborly consideration. Excessive or premature snow removal that creates visual disparity or implies criticism of neighboring properties may be subject to review and potential fines. I read it 3 times. They were actually saying that clearing my snow too well and too quickly was a violation because it made my neighbors look bad. This was insane. My phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. The caller ID showed the HOA management company name. "Mr. Quinlan, this is Brenda Turnbull, president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA board. I am returning your call regarding the citation." Her voice had that particular tone that I had learned to recognize over the years, the one that certain middle-aged women in positions of minor authority used when they were preparing to be completely unreasonable while acting like they were being perfectly rational. Yes, thank you for calling back, I said, keeping my voice level. I need you to explain why I am being fined for clearing snow from my property. Mr. Quinlan, the citation is very clear. You violated Section 4.7 by engaging in snow removal activities that were excessive and created an unfair aesthetic comparison with neighboring properties. I cleared my driveway and sidewalk. That is what homeowners are supposed to do. The township requires us to clear our sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall ending. The storm only ended at midnight, Mr. Quinlan. You were observed removing snow at 4:45 in the morning, well before any reasonable person would begin such activities. Additionally, your removal was described as aggressively thorough, creating a stark contrast with surrounding properties and implying that your neighbors were negligent. I actually laughed out loud at that. Are you serious right now? I woke up early and decided to clear my snow. How is that aggressive? The HOA board has received complaints from multiple residents that your behavior creates pressure and unrealistic standards. Some of our elderly residents and those with physical limitations cannot clear snow at such early hours or to such a degree of completeness. Your actions make them feel inadequate. That is not my problem, I said flatly. I maintained my property. What my neighbors do with theirs is their business. Your attitude is exactly the issue, Mr. Quinlan. We are a community. We need to be considerate of each other. The fine stands. You have 30 days to pay, or we will place a lien on your property. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my office, staring at my phone in disbelief. This could not be legal. There was no way an HOA could fine someone for clearing snow too efficiently. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching Pennsylvania HOA law and found a local attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Patricia Morrison, and she had good reviews online. I called and scheduled a consultation for the next day. That evening, I decided to attend the Township Supervisor's meeting. Allentown Township held public meetings every 2 weeks, and I had never bothered going to one before. But the citation had mentioned creating problems with community standards, and I wanted to know if the township had any issues with what I had done. The meeting was held at the Township building, a modest brick structure on Hamilton Boulevard. About 20 people were scattered through the small auditorium when I arrived. I signed in and took a seat near the back. The meeting covered various topics, budget items, road maintenance schedules, and updates on a planned park expansion. During the public comment period, I raised my hand. "Yes, sir. Please state your name and address," the chairman said. He was an older man with white hair and glasses, wearing a flannel shirt under a vest. "Henry Quinlan, 847 Maple Ridge Drive in Meadowbrook Hills. I have a question about snow removal requirements." "Go ahead." Yesterday's storm, I cleared my driveway and sidewalks early in the morning, including the public sidewalk in front of my property. I want to confirm I met all township requirements. The chairman looked at the other 2 supervisors, then back at me. "If you cleared your public sidewalk within 24 hours of the storm ending, then yes, you met the requirement. Did you receive a violation notice from our code enforcement?" "No, nothing from the township. The HOA in my neighborhood fined me for clearing snow too efficiently." The 3 supervisors exchanged glances. One of them, a younger woman with short brown hair, leaned forward to her microphone. "I am sorry, they fined you for what?" "For clearing my snow too early and too thoroughly. They said it created unfair aesthetic disparities with my neighbors." The chairman took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "That is the most ridiculous thing I have heard in 30 years of township service. Mr. Quinlan, from the township's perspective, We wish every resident cleared their snow as promptly and thoroughly as you did. We have no issue whatsoever with your actions. What the HOA does is unfortunately outside our jurisdiction, but for the record, you did exactly what a responsible homeowner should do. Several people in the audience actually clapped. I felt validated but still stuck with a $500 fine. After the meeting, the female supervisor approached me. She introduced herself as Margaret Kendrick. "I live over in Meadowbrook Hills too," she said quietly. "Brenda Turnbull is on a power trip. She has been causing problems for months. Last fall, she tried to fine someone for having their garbage cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours. Before that, she went after a family for having a vegetable garden in their backyard because she could see the tomato stakes from her second-floor window. The board votes however she tells them to because they do not want to deal with her." "Is there anything I can do?" I asked. "Fight it. Document everything." She counts on people just paying the fines to make her go away. If enough people push back, maybe we can get her voted out next election. I thanked her and headed home, feeling slightly better but still frustrated. The next morning, I had my consultation with Patricia Morrison. Her office was in a small professional building in downtown Allentown. She was in her 50s, with gray streaked black hair and sharp eyes that suggested she did not miss much. I explained the entire situation, showing her the citation, the HOA bylaws, and the section they claimed I violated. She read through everything carefully, making notes on a legal pad. "This is interesting," she finally said. "The language in Section 4.7 is vague enough that they might argue it gives them broad discretion, but the application is so absurd that I think we have multiple angles to challenge it. So you think I can fight this?" "Absolutely." First, the bylaw itself may be unenforceable as unreasonably restrictive. Pennsylvania courts have held that HOA rules must be reasonable and not arbitrary. Punishing someone for maintaining their property is arguably arbitrary. Second, there is no objective standard here. What constitutes excessive snow removal? How do you measure aesthetic disparity? It is completely subjective, which makes it difficult to enforce consistently. What are my options? You can request a hearing before the HOA board, which you should do regardless. Document everything. Get statements from anyone who supports you and present your case. If they deny your appeal, which based on what you have told me about this Brenda Turnbull person, they probably will, then we can file suit to challenge the fine. We would argue the bylaw is unenforceable and seek an injunction preventing them from collecting. What would that cost? My retainer for HOA cases starts at $3,000. If it goes to court, you are looking at potentially $10,000 to $15,000 total, depending on how hard they fight. I winced. Fighting a $500 fine could cost me 30 times that amount. "I know it seems like a lot," Patricia said, "but consider this. If you pay the fine, you are setting a precedent that they can enforce this ridiculous rule. What happens next time it snows? Are you supposed to let your snow sit there until enough neighbors clear theirs? It is not just about the money, it is about the principle and protecting your property rights." She was right. This was not just about $500. It was about some petty tyrant on a power trip trying to control when and how I maintained my own property. "Let me think about it," I said. "Take your time, but do file for that hearing within the 30-day window. Even if you decide not to pursue litigation, you want to preserve your options." I left her office and sat in my car for a while, thinking. I did not want to spend thousands fighting my HOA. I just wanted to clear my driveway without being harassed. That evening, I started doing something I should have done sooner. I talked to my neighbors. Tom Hendricks next door was sympathetic. "I heard about the fine," he said when I explained the situation. It is garbage. Brenda has had it out for anyone who does not kiss up to her. She tried to make me remove my basketball hoop last year because she said it was an eyesore. I ignored her and nothing came of it. Did you get a citation? Yeah, but I just threw it away. After a few months, she dropped it. That was interesting. Maybe Brenda's bark was worse than her bite. I talked to several other neighbors over the next few days. Out of the 20 houses on my street, I spoke with residents from 14 of them. 9 were sympathetic and thought the fine was ridiculous. 3 said they had no opinion and did not want to get involved. 2, unfortunately, sided with the HOA. One of those 2 was Dorothy Fleming, an elderly woman who lived 3 doors down. "It is not right that you cleared your snow so early," she told me, standing in her doorway wrapped in a thick cardigan. It made me feel terrible that I could not get out there at that hour. My son did not come to plow my driveway until 9 in the morning. Your driveway being so clean made mine look awful. Mrs. Fleming, I was not trying to make anyone look bad. I just could not sleep and decided to be productive. Well, you should have thought about how it would affect others. We need to be more considerate in this neighborhood. The other person who sided with the HOA was Jason Pratt, a guy about my age who I had never particularly liked. "Honestly, man, it was kind of a show-off move," he said when I caught him getting his mail. 4:30 in the morning, come on. You knew you would be the first one done. You were making a statement. I was clearing my driveway, Jason. That is it, if you say so. I walked away from that conversation feeling even more frustrated. Some people would find a reason to complain about anything. The most helpful conversation was with Bill Yamamoto, who lived on the corner. Bill was in his 40s, worked in IT, and apparently had his own history with Brenda. "She threatened to fine me 3 times last year," he said, inviting me into his kitchen for coffee. First for having my porch light out for 2 days, which violated some aesthetic standard. Then for having a ladder visible in my garage when the door was open. The 3rd time was because my son left his bicycle on the front lawn overnight. That is insane. It gets better. I started researching and found out that Brenda has issued over 100 citations in the past 18 months. The previous HOA board in the 6 years before that issued maybe 20 total. She is on a crusade to micromanage everyone. Why has no one stopped her? Because she got herself elected with 2 other board members who do whatever she says. The other 4 board positions are held by people who mostly rubber stamp her decisions because they do not want the conflict. There is a board election coming up in April, though. 3 seats are up, including hers. This was useful information. So if she loses the election, this all goes away, probably. The problem is getting people motivated to vote. HOA elections typically get maybe 30% turnout. Brenda gets her supporters out, usually the same busybodies who like having someone enforce rules on everyone else. Normal people do not bother voting. We need to change that. Bill grinned. Now you are talking. I have been thinking about running for one of the open seats myself. If you are serious about fighting this, I can connect you with some others who are fed up with her. Over the next week, I became more involved with my neighborhood's politics than I ever imagined I would be. Bill introduced me to a group of about 15 homeowners who met informally to discuss HOA issues. They called themselves the Meadowbrook Homeowners Coalition, though they had no official status. The group met at someone's house every couple of weeks. The next meeting was at a woman named Susan Park's house on the other side of the neighborhood. About 12 people showed up, crowding into her living room with drinks and snacks. Everyone had an HOA horror story involving Brenda Turnbull. Marcus Webb had been fined for having window shutters that were painted cream instead of the approved white. The difference was barely noticeable. Jennifer Hayes received a citation because her mailbox post had weathered wood grain showing through the paint, which constituted inadequate maintenance. Paul Reynolds got fined because his teenage daughter had friends over and 3 cars were parked on the street in front of his house for 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon, which apparently violated guidelines about not creating parking congestion. The stories went on and on. What became clear was that Brenda used the HOA rules as a weapon to harass people she did not like, enforce her personal aesthetic preferences, and generally make herself feel important. The problem is the bylaws give the board broad enforcement discretion, Susan explained. She was a paralegal and had studied the HOA's governing documents extensively. Brenda exploits vague language to justify almost anything, and because most people just pay the fines rather than fight, she has been able to create this little fiefdom. "What if we all refuse to pay?" someone asked. "Then she puts liens on our properties, and eventually that affects our ability to sell or refinance. Some people cannot take that risk." "What about the election?" I asked. "That is our best shot," Bill said. 3 seats are up. Brenda is running for re-election, and her 2 allies are also running. We need to run 3 candidates against them and get people to actually vote. "I will run," I said. The words came out before I fully thought them through, but once I said them, I knew it was right. She came after me for clearing snow. If that is the level we are at, someone needs to stand up to her. "I am already planning to run," Bill said. "That is 2, we need a 3rd. Susan raised her hand. "I will do it. I have been dealing with her nonsense for 2 years. Time to fix this properly." We spent the rest of the evening planning strategy. The election was in early April, about 8 weeks away. We needed to get the word out, convince people to vote, and present ourselves as the reasonable alternative to Brenda's reign of petty tyranny. Meanwhile, I still had to deal with my immediate problem, the $500 fine. Following Patricia Morrison's advice, I filed a formal appeal requesting a hearing before the HOA board. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, in early March. I spent that time preparing my case. I gathered statements from supportive neighbors, printed out the township ordinance requiring prompt sidewalk clearing, and prepared a presentation explaining why the fine was unjust and the rule was unenforceable. The hearing was held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. The HOA board sat at a long table at the front. Brenda Turnbull in the middle, with her 2 close allies on either side of her, and 4 other board members filling out the rest of the seats. Brenda was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, blonde hair styled in that particular way that required regular salon visits, wearing a blazer like she was running a corporate board meeting instead of a neighborhood HOA. She had the kind of tight smile that never reached her eyes. About 20 people sat in the audience, including Bill, Susan, and several others from our coalition, there to support me. Brenda called the meeting to order with excessive formality, making a show of following parliamentary procedure. "We are here to consider the appeal of Henry Quinlan regarding citation 2025-047 for violation of Section 4.7. Mr. Quinlan, you have 15 minutes to present your case." I stood up and walked to a podium they had set up. I had printed copies of my presentation for each board member. "Thank you. I am appealing this fine because it is unjust and based on an unreasonable interpretation of HOA rules. On February 12th, I cleared snow from my property beginning at approximately 4:45 in the morning. I used a snowblower to clear my driveway, walkway, and the public sidewalk in front of my property. All of this is normal snow removal that every homeowner is expected to do. I paused and looked at each board member. The citation claims I violated Section 4.7 by clearing snow too efficiently and too early, supposedly creating aesthetic disparities with my neighbors. This interpretation is absurd for several reasons. First, there is no objective standard for what constitutes excessive snow removal. The rule is unconstitutionally vague and gives the board unlimited discretion to punish homeowners for normal property maintenance. Mr. Quinlan, Brenda interrupted. This is an HOA hearing, not a criminal trial. There is nothing unconstitutional about our rules. With respect, Mrs. Turnbull, HOA rules are still subject to standards of reasonableness under Pennsylvania law. But let me continue. Second, the township actually requires us to clear our sidewalks within 24 hours of snowfall ending. I was complying with township ordinance. At the last township supervisors meeting, the chairman specifically stated that they wished every resident cleared snow as promptly as I did. You are punishing me for following township requirements. One of the board members I did not know, a man in his 60s named Robert Chen, spoke up. Did you really go to the township meeting about this? Yes, I have a recording if you would like to hear it. The township made clear they have no issue with what I did and actually appreciated my responsibility. Robert looked uncomfortable. Good. Third, I continued, this rule as interpreted is unenforceable. What am I supposed to do next time it snows? Wait and watch my neighbors to see who clears first. Let snow sit on my property so I do not clear it too soon. Let the township cite me for not clearing my sidewalk because I am worried about HOA complaints. The rule creates an impossible situation. I handed out the neighbor statements I had collected. Finally, I have statements from 9 neighbors on my street confirming they had no issue with my snow removal and thought this fine was inappropriate. The so-called complaints that justified this citation appear to come from a very small minority. Brenda's expression had gone cold. Are you finished? Yes. The board will deliberate and issue a decision within 7 business days. The board members huddled together, speaking in low voices. This went on for about 10 minutes while everyone in the audience waited. Finally, they broke. Mr. Quinlan, the board has heard your appeal. However, we disagree with your interpretation of our rules. Section 4.7 exists to maintain community harmony and ensure that homeowners act with consideration for their neighbors. Your decision to clear snow at an extremely early hour before most residents were even awake demonstrated a lack of such consideration. I was maintaining my property, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You were showing off, Brenda snapped, her professional facade slipping for a moment. You wanted everyone to see how much better you were than them. That is not the kind of attitude we want in this community. That is not true, and you have no evidence of my motivations. I have complaints from concerned residents. Who? Can I see these complaints? Do I have a right to face my accusers? Brenda's lips thinned. The HOA protects the confidentiality of complainants. How convenient. Mr. Quinlan, your appeal is denied. The fine stands. If you do not pay within the original 30-day window, we will proceed with placing a lien on your property. This hearing is adjourned. She banged a gavel that seemed ridiculously theatrical. I left the hearing angry but not surprised. Brenda was not going to back down, and her board loyalists would never vote against her. The next day, I called Patricia Morrison. I want to fight this, I told her, all the way if necessary. I was hoping you would say that. Let me draw up the paperwork. We will file suit challenging the fine and seeking an injunction. We will also argue that the rule itself is unenforceable. While Patricia worked on the legal case, I threw myself into the election campaign. Bill, Susan, and I created a simple platform: reasonable enforcement of reasonable rules, transparency in board decisions, and treating homeowners like adults rather than children who needed constant supervision. We created a simple website, printed flyers, and went door to door talking to neighbors. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People were tired of Brenda's heavy-handed approach, but had felt powerless to do anything about it. Brenda, meanwhile, doubled down. She sent out an official HOA email warning about a disruptive faction trying to take over the board and eliminate community standards. She held a candidates forum at the clubhouse, where she and her allies spent most of the time attacking us. "These people want chaos," Brenda said during the forum. "They want to eliminate rules entirely. They want everyone to do whatever they want with no consideration for property values or community aesthetics. Is that the neighborhood you want to live in?" When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I cleared snow from my driveway and got fined $500. That is what this election is about. Do you want an HOA that punishes normal property maintenance, or do you want one that focuses on actual problems? The choice is pretty clear. People applauded. Brenda looked furious. The legal case moved forward. Patricia filed our lawsuit in late March. The HOA's attorney filed a motion to dismiss, arguing we had no standing to challenge their internal rules. Patricia countered with case law showing that Pennsylvania courts regularly reviewed HOA actions for reasonableness. The judge, a woman named Sandra Martinez, scheduled a hearing for mid-April, after the election. That timing actually worked in our favor. If we won the board seats, we could potentially resolve the whole thing without a court battle. Election day was April 8th. Voting took place at the clubhouse from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. Our coalition worked hard to get people out to vote, sending reminders, offering to watch kids or pets, doing whatever we could to overcome the usual apathy. I voted at 7:30 in the morning before work. The poll workers said turnout was already higher than usual. That was encouraging. That evening, vote counting began at 8. Results would be posted by 9. Our whole coalition gathered at Bill's house to wait. My phone buzzed at 8:45. It was Bill, even though he was standing right across the room. "Check the HOA website," his text said. I pulled it up on my phone. The results were already posted. Bill Yamamoto, 287 votes, elected. Susan Park, 281 votes, elected. Henry Quinlan, 276 votes, elected. Brenda Turnbull, 193 votes, defeated. The room erupted in cheers. We had done it. All three of us had won, and Brenda was out. The celebration continued late into the night. For the first time in years, people felt like their HOA might actually work for them instead of against them. The first new board meeting was scheduled for late April. There were 7 total board positions. 3 had just been elected, that was us. 4 positions were continuing their terms. Robert Chen, who had seemed uncomfortable during my hearing, Martha Blackwell and David Sterling, who were Brenda's allies, and Patricia Hoffman, who had mostly stayed quiet during Brenda's reign. Our first order of business was electing a new board president. Bill nominated me. Susan seconded. Robert, to my surprise, voted with us. Patricia did too. Martha and David voted for David as president, but they were outvoted 5-2. Suddenly, I was HOA board president. "First item," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I move that citation 2025-047 against Henry Quinlan be rescinded and expunged from HOA records, as it was based on an unreasonable interpretation of our rules." "Second," Susan said immediately. "All in favor." 5 hands went up. Mine, Bill's, Susan's, Robert's, and Patricia's. Motion passes. The fine is rescinded. Martha glared at me. This is a conflict of interest. You are voting on your own fine. And 3 other board members agreed with me, which means it is not just about my personal interest. It means the fine was wrong. Next item. I move that we review Section 4.7 and revise it to remove vague language that could be used to punish normal property maintenance. Second, Bill said. That passed 5-2 as well. Over the next several meetings, we systematically reviewed Brenda's citation spree. Out of the 127 citations issued in the previous 18 months, we found that 93 were for minor, technical violations that should never have resulted in fines. Things like temporarily visible garbage cans, minor paint imperfections, mailbox weathering, kids' toys left in yards overnight, and other petty nonsense. We rescinded every questionable fine. For those homeowners who had already paid, we issued refunds from the HOA's reserve fund. We also rewrote large sections of the HOA rules to create clear, objective standards and eliminate vague language that gave the board excessive discretion. Martha and David fought us on everything, but they were consistently outvoted. After 3 months, David resigned from the board in frustration. Martha stuck around, presumably to keep making things difficult, but she was ineffective without allies. The lawsuit became moot once the fine was rescinded, so Patricia helped me file a dismissal. The judge seemed amused when she read the case file and saw that the plaintiff was now HOA president. "It seems you resolved your dispute through the democratic process," she said at the brief dismissal hearing. "That is exactly how these things should work. Case dismissed." Life in Meadowbrook Hills got significantly better. Without the constant threat of arbitrary citations, people relaxed. They maintained their properties because they took pride in them, not because they feared punishment. We saw Brenda around the neighborhood occasionally. She never made eye contact and certainly never spoke to me. I heard through the grapevine that she was considering moving. I would not miss her. The next winter brought another significant snowstorm. I woke up early again, around 4:30 in the morning, and started up my snowblower. As I cleared my driveway in the dark, cold morning, I saw lights come on in Tom Hendrick's garage next door. He came out with his own snowblower and waved. By 6 in the morning, half the street was out clearing snow. People worked together, helping elderly neighbors, clearing around mailboxes, making sure sidewalks were safe. It was what a real community looked like. No citations appeared on anyone's door. At the Township Supervisor's meeting that month, Margaret Kendrick mentioned our neighborhood specifically during her report. "I want to commend the Meadowbrook Hills community for their excellent snow removal this winter. That neighborhood has been exemplary in maintaining their sidewalks promptly and thoroughly. It sets a great example for the rest of the township." I attended that meeting and thanked her afterward. "I heard you became HOA president," she said. "That must have been quite a turnaround." It was. Turns out people respond pretty well when you treat them with respect instead of looking for reasons to fine them. Funny how that works. I continued to serve on the HOA board for the next 2 years. Bill and Susan served their full terms as well, and when elections came around again, we helped recruit more reasonable candidates. The board never returned to the petty tyranny of Brenda's era. We focused on actual community improvements, organizing neighborhood events, maintaining common areas, and addressing real problems like a drainage issue that affected several properties and negotiating better rates for snow removal of HOA-maintained streets. The reserve fund grew instead of being depleted by frivolous legal threats. Property values in the neighborhood increased. Most importantly, people actually liked living there again. I learned a lot from the whole experience. I learned that petty tyrants thrive when good people stay silent and apathetic. I learned that fighting back, even when it seems expensive or difficult, can be worth it both for yourself and for others who do not have the resources or confidence to fight. I also learned that HOAs, despite their terrible reputation, can actually work when run by reasonable people focused on genuine community interests, rather than personal power trips. The snow removal fine that started it all became a running joke in the neighborhood. Every winter, someone would inevitably make a comment about making sure not to clear snow too efficiently. But they would say it while actually clearing their snow promptly and thoroughly, because that is what responsible homeowners do. Tom Hendricks put up a joke sign in his yard one December. Warning: aggressive snow removal zone. His wife made him take it down after a few days, but we all got a laugh out of it. Years later, I still run into people who remember that crazy snow fine. It became part of neighborhood lore, a story told to new residents to explain why our HOA was different from others, why we took governance seriously, and why we never let anyone abuse the small amount of power that comes with sitting on a volunteer board. Brenda did eventually move away about 3 years after losing her board seat. I heard she joined an HOA board in her new neighborhood in New Jersey. I almost felt sorry for those people, but ultimately they would have to fight their own battles just like we did. The experience changed how I thought about community involvement. Before the snow incident, I had been content to ignore HOA meetings, pay my dues, and assume someone else was handling things. I learned that assumption was dangerous. Small-scale local governance matters precisely because it affects your daily life so directly. I eventually stepped down as board president after 3 years, feeling like we had accomplished what we needed to accomplish. Bill took over, and he was excellent at it. Susan served another term and then stepped down to focus on work and family. We remained friends and occasionally got together for dinner to reminisce about the HOA wars, as we jokingly called them. My property values increased significantly, though I had no plans to move. I had put too much work into making Meadowbrook Hills a good place to live. My driveway continued to be cleared promptly and efficiently every time it snowed, without any citations appearing on my door. The township eventually used our neighborhood as a case study in good HOA governance, presenting our revised bylaws as a model at a regional planning conference. Margaret Kendrick told me about it afterward. "You should be proud," she said. "You took a bad situation and turned it into something positive that is helping people beyond just your neighborhood." I was proud, though I tried not to be obnoxious about it. The whole thing had started because I could not sleep one night and decided to clear some snow. Such a simple, mundane action, and it spiraled into a months-long battle that ultimately transformed our entire community. If there is a lesson in all of it, maybe it is this: pay attention to who has power over your life, even in small ways. Hold them accountable when they abuse it. Do not assume someone else will fix problems if you ignore them. And sometimes, clearing your driveway at 4 in the morning is an act of unintentional rebellion that changes everything. I still wake up early sometimes during winter storms, still fire up that same snowblower, and still take satisfaction in the clean, efficient work it does. The difference now is that I do it without looking over my shoulder, without wondering if some petty bureaucrat will punish me for maintaining my property. That freedom to just be a responsible homeowner without harassment is what I fought for, and it was worth every hour of effort, every dollar spent on legal fees, and every frustrating HOA meeting. My neighborhood is a better place now. Not perfect, but better. People look out for each other without being forced to. They maintain their properties with pride. They participate in community decisions. They vote in elections. And when it snows, they clear their driveways whenever it makes sense for them to clear them, efficiently or otherwise, without fear. That is how it should be. That is what a real community looks like. And it all started with one ridiculous $500 fine for clearing snow too well.